So let's talk about the role of the banks and also non-bank lenders like yourself, evolving in this environment of tightening liquidity cautious banks. I mean, I've spoken to some financiers, some are coming back with 100% loans, some are even talking 110% loans. So it seems that so there's been a shift towards more sort of flexible, more innovative financing models. So can you maybe tell us, what's happening from certainly Sentinel Homes perspective, what you offer that traditional banks don't, and what else is out there? What's kind of happening in terms of the different products?
So Neil, there is a research note. It's not so recent anymore, by a very well-known stock brokerage called Anchor Capital, where they analyzed in great detail the mortgage lenders. And the finding is that the average return on assets for housing finance in South Africa for home loans by the big mortgage lenders is about 0.6%. So wow. That's very low return on assets. You wouldn't, for instance, run a 7-Eleven on that basis, that you have a return on assets of 6%. And so home loans, as a result of the competitiveness of the market and the fact that we have bond originators who multi-submit and whatever, has become a very tight industry. And it seems as though the banks are treating mortgages, home loans, as almost a loss leader to gather the balance of the client's business, which is also why you see the banks, the mortgage lenders, who have transactional banking capabilities, offering things like, this is your interest rate. If you're not primary banked with us, but if you move your primary banking relationship to us, then we can give you a lower rate. And that's because they actually want the balance of your business. That's where they're really trying to make their money. They're not really making money out of housing finance. Housing finance for the mortgage lenders, especially the banks, is not so very much a profitable proposition, if we can trust the calculations of Anchor Capital, and I do. I read the entire note. And so the fact is that in this climate where housing finance is not so very attractive from a profit point of view, the fact is that this home loan delinquency increase is impacting quite significantly on the established players, the large people who already sort of reached the static state in the market. And what they're trying to do, in my humble opinion, is that they're trying to balance the slightly delinquent book by adding people who can afford it now to the book. Right? So if you come to the bank now and you're a consumer and you can afford it at 11%, then the banks estimate that, in the medium term, the interest rate is going to be lower than 11%. So you're going to be able to continue to afford it. And by adding non-delinquent borrowers to the book, they're balancing the delinquent portion slightly. So it's a sort of a credit risk management strategy. That's why they're coming into the market so very aggressively, is because they're actually trying to expand their book so that they can balance this bit of delinquency that's coming down the road. And so, we are seeing very high willingness in the market to lend. We've also seen a very quick recovery in the volumes in the market. So volumes have recovered very nicely, and we're sort of midway between the doldrums and the craziness of 2021 after COVID ended. And the volumes are much better than they were in 2024 as the pent-up demand has come spilling in the market. But we're also finding, obviously, because I do have to toot the horn that I have, is that the target market for Sentinel Homes' offering is also becoming wise to what we offer, which is obviously that we cater for all those people who are creditworthy and can afford a home loan, but just don't get attractive terms from a bank, either because they're self-employed or freelancers or work abroad or work on the internet or whatever their strange situation may be that puts off the bank. They not only are people becoming wise to the offering, we're being flooded by applications. So we're struggling to keep afloat and abreast of all of the applications that are spilling into us. And so this is a very welcome, obviously. I'd rather have that problem than the reverse. We can definitely see that our estimation that our offering will broaden the access to housing finance in South Africa by about 10%. That is definitely something that now from our statistics looks as though it might even be very conservative. So all in all, I feel very positive about the housing market. We just need...
Yes, tell us a little bit about that. Yes. Tell us what are the residential segments, locations showing most potential right now and why? What's going on?
So in the Western Cape, I mean, it's still a story of two countries, right? The demand for property in the Western Cape is very high. There are several reasons for this. Firstly, if we look at employment, then we see that the unemployment rate for the Western Cape is about a third lower than in the balance of the country, and it's even much lower than that when compared to some of the provinces that have the worst unemployment. And the reason for that is that I'm by no means saying that we have anything close to competent or fantastic governance in the Western Cape. It's just that there is a differential between the governance in the Western Cape and the governance in the balance of the country. The role of the public sector is to maintain the infrastructure that allows the economy to function. And in most of the country, that has been failing. And in the Western Cape, that is sort of humming along. I mean, it doesn't inspire, at this point, it doesn't yet inspire sort of me to lyricism. But there is a differential. And the problem with that differential is that differential compounds over time, right? So the difference between, say, the infrastructure upkeep and maintenance in the Western Cape and the infrastructure and maintenance upkeep of infrastructure in the Free State, which I visited in December, is plain. You just have to open your eyes. Even my very young children could see, that something was going on here that they're not used to living in the Western Cape. And I mean, we don't have to say what that is. All we need is for the public sector people to do the job and to actually spend the money that is available, because it is available, on the things for which it is supposed to be spent, and then we wouldn't have this problem. Unfortunately, we do. And so this is going to be a thing that is compounding over time as the Western province is going to eke out ahead in front of the other provinces. In the most recent Stats SA jobs data, the Western Cape province added 149,000 jobs, and the average in South Africa was that the unemployment increased. And I think the second closest province was the Free State at something like 29,000 jobs. Gauteng about 9,000, and the rest were all negative.
Unbelievable.
Right? So it's becoming a story of sort of two countries, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so as far as that's concerned, in the Western Cape, the problem is fast becoming that these people who are employed and I mean, any income distribution is almost always pyramid shaped, right? There are a few people who are very rich at the top, but then the vast majority of the population falls sort of to the middle and below on the income distribution. And in most places in the Western Cape, the profile, if we look at the capital values of properties, is almost sort of like violin shaped, or like a 60s underwear model, if you prefer that image. And it's sort of plump around the edges, and then very sort of thin in the middle, because the gap market is being left out. That's a story of several things, which includes that there are several market design disincentives to delivering stock in that market, such as, for instance, it's very difficult. It's the poorer a tenant becomes, the more difficult it is to evict that person, which means that when housing supply is designed, you don't design for poorer people, because you're not going to get investors to buy it, probably, because they can't. It's going to be a struggle to evict. They'll probably prefer to have slightly richer tenants if they can take it. And so, despite living in South Africa, we see that the average tenancy is between 7,000 and 9,000 rand. That's much too high. More than 50% of tenancies fall into that price category. It's much too high because there's no rental properties being delivered down market where the real demand is. And what I always say about this, Neil, and I probably said this even on your thing before, if you go to any supermarket now, wanting to buy a bread, there will not only be a bread, there will be several varieties for you to choose from. And it almost never happens in our experience that you go to a shop and there's no bread. But then who supplies that bread, right? Who plans for that? And the answer is no one plans for that. There is a demand for bread in a certain area, and then there is a supermarket that has a shelf, and the shelf fills with bread because there are people who are punting bread. And it's always there, right? Because they don't want to miss a sale. So in a market such as housing, for something that isn't even a perishable product, right? Because the perishability increases the problems with supplying it. If there is a large demand for something, such as for gap housing, and the market is not chasing its profit incentive to provide that housing, that means that there is some impediment, some obstacle, some friction in the way that the market works or is designed that must be removed in order to supply. And in the Western Cape, because everything has grown very fast in price, this problem is becoming very, 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 very acute. And it seems as though some of the local governments have realized this, which is obviously positive. But what is negative is that some of them have started to try do something about it. And those have been more well-meaning than well-designed initiatives in most cases. Like, say, Stellenbosch, I don't want to single out anyone, but in Stellenbosch, I know of an approval that was just granted for a development where you have to supply a certain percentage of units that are let out or sold in the affordable market. And the affordable market is defined as rentals below 8,000 Rand. So what do developers do? They have 10 flats of 100 that are being rented for 8,000 Rand a month. Right? So once again, we're not supplying tenancies for 5, we're not supplying tenancies for 4, because due to price pressures and whatever, they're trying to glean the maximum return from those 10 that they're compelled to restrict. And that's going to be 8,000 Rand. That's not going to be 7.5. It's definitely not going to be 4. And the same thing happens if you try to restrict the price, because now the balance of the units in the development are just going to be subsidizing these ones that you sell for cheap. And actually, if you think about it, it's an arbitrary transfer of wealth, because the people who are now, there's only 10. And so some arbitrary person is going to be granted this unit at a discount and probably going to be able to flip it for a profit immediately, thereby once again just transferring cash and actually not solving the problem of housing. It's a rather intractable problem. It's a very difficult one to solve. I don't necessarily have the solution already. I can just see that the iterative way in which this is being rolled out, there are going to be a couple of problems. The planning division for the inner city has started making similar sounds, where they want to compel developers to provide affordable housing in the same development, say in Sea Point, where they're developing a 12 million Rand flat. There must also now be one for 600,000. And it has the same problem of the arbitrary wealth transfer, or alternatively, of the fact that you're not really going to create affordable housing up and down the market for affordable housing where the needs are. You're just going to be creating units at whatever arbitrary level you put as the maximum. That's where the delivery is going to be. So this is going to be a big problem. This is going to be something that is going to be a big problem going forward. And obviously, if the demand is for flats of 12 million, and you're now restricting them by compelling people to develop in the same development some flats for 600, what effectively is going to happen is that the market for 12 million Rand flats is not going to be saturated, which means that there's going to be price growth even there, which further exacerbates the problem. So this is rather a very difficult thing. I'm happy that I am not the planner, but the local governments are going to have to realize that they're going to have to employ some smart economists and some smart policy wonks to go and sit in a room somewhere and give them some pipe tobacco or red wine or whatever they want and make them come up with something that works and that can be applied consistently. Because what also is happening now as a result of these iterative attempts at solving this problem, which is intractable, is that it creates a lot of uncertainty, which once again increases the cost of new housing supply development. And if you're increasing the cost of new housing supply development, you're increasing friction, you're deteriorating market design, which is further exacerbating the problem. So you're sort of screwed if you do and screwed if you don't. And that's a very difficult problem to solve. It's a thorny one, and we're going to have to solve it. As far as areas are concerned, obviously we see what's happening in the Western Cape, right? All the metro areas, and then what's happening is that the places that are sort of within an hour or two of the large metro areas are growing very fast. And so the beneficiaries of this include, say, Mossel Bay or Dana Bay or Bochums Bay, which is close enough still to George Airport to be attractive to even commuters. And then it's also, say, happening to places like Eiserfontein, which is booming, Langebaan, which is booming, St. Helena Bay, which is booming despite the smell, because they're within close proximity of Cape Town, close enough to the airport that if you need to go somewhere, you can go there easily. As far as the balance of the country is concerned, there's a lot of activity in Pebega, used to be known as Port Elizabeth. It's sort of the shining light of the Eastern Cape at the moment as far as property prices are concerned. And there's also been a turnaround in what's happening in East London, especially at the top end of the East London market. There's a lot of activity. eThekwini, the whole KwaZulu-Natal area is still struggling. There are some sort of bits rays of positivity towards the north, especially where that large property development is happening. The hotel, the Club Med Hotel, that's being built, the first in South Africa. That's obviously a positive a positive development. It's a sort of a vote of confidence in South Africa and in the property market and in KwaZulu-Natal specifically. And it's probably going to create a lot of jobs and have a lot of knock-on effects. So that's very positive indeed. As far as Johannesburg and Pretoria are concerned, Pretoria is currently getting a bit of stick. But if we look at what's happening in the property market, then we can see that the east of Pretoria is just as popular as it used to be, and is continuing to grow its appeal and its price levels. And in Johannesburg, it's the places that you'd expect, right? Like the Parks and Northcliffe and Linden, those kinds of areas that really are the beneficiaries of what activity there is. We do find large lead times. I have a property, for instance, in Eagle Canyon Golf Estate, a flat I'm trying to sell, and I'm having a particularly tough time of getting even a nibble. I'm considering pricing a tenant because we just can't even seem to give it away as a birthday present.
Wow. Renier, it's always good chatting to you. I like that. And it's very, I think, practical, very insightful advice, I think, for everybody. And I think just navigating the whole sort of economic landscape and seeing where you can unlock property. It's always good chatting to you. We always get good feedback. And so just for everybody that's watching, if you want to find out more about Combined Finance Sentinel Homes, you can access Smarter Finance for your next investment. You visit the links, which is combinedfinance.co.za. I don't know if there's any other contact number that you want to add. If they do want to reach out for you, just go on the website.
The website has it all.
It's got it all there. And so everybody just remember, in a market defined by both demand and scarcity, timing and the right financial structure make all the difference. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on REI Investor Talk. And thank you once again, Renier Kriek. It's always good chatting to you. And until then, everybody, happy investing.